Thank you so much for being here. My name is Meredith Horsford. I'm the executive director of the museum, and this is our first ever since COVID in-person program. So welcome back to the farmhouse, and I hope you enjoy. A vernal celebration by colonial Dutch decree, 30 days after Easter, to be exact, the Holy Spirit to the earth comes back to mark Pentecost season, Pinkster in Dutch, Americanized to Pinkster, and now we know it as such. The markings of spring, of hope and renewal, a time for connecting Dutch and African all, but separately. The Dutch arrived on the Isle of Manhattan, Lenapehoking to the First Peoples. The Dutch made a $1 land grab. And in this New Netherlands, they do their colonizing thing, freeze their butts off in the winter, harvest what they can in the spring. With an American flair, a certain kind of peace was in the air. Maybe the Dutch and their African property aren't quite friends, but there were legal ways for Africans to be free and to make their own dividends. Most farms might only have a few Africans working. A prosperous one might have 20 enslaved. Africans were integral to Dutch colony building, and most were multi-skilled or were apprenticed in a particular trade. But as commodities, Africans were sold in an oft-repeated refrain. But even when sold, connections could still be maintained. Once a year, they knew all would be all right when, Pinkster holiday, we're able to gather again. Some Africans have to travel for days from faraway farms, but they do it with smiles on their faces, excited to see loved ones scattered far and wide, meeting new friends as they journey the countryside. For many weeks before, we prepare. Who will we meet? Who will we see? The excitement builds every night in our dreams. The vendors, the parties, the games, the food, and oh yeah, the church service. That's the first thing we'll do. We make goods to trade and to sell. We put on our finest threads. We recall a year of stories to tell. We step into the bantaba to dance the rituals of our ancestors. A hybrid of tribes on display. We hold dance and music as constant connectors to what will come in the next moment and what has come in the past, creating those memories until next Pinkster have to last. Friends, it's so good to see you all. You've traveled from far and wide to celebrate this holiday with us. Pinkster Hill. What pleasant memories of my boyhood does that name bring up? We know it now as the place where the state capitol building sits in Albany here. That hill was famous as the gathering place of all the colored people of the city. I love you too, baby. And of the country for miles around during the Pinkster Festival in May. There, they received their freedom for a week. They erected booths where gingerbread, cider, and apple toddy were dispensed. On the hill, they spent the days and evenings in sport, dancing and drinking to their heart's content. I remember these gatherings with delight when old King Charlie, dressed in his gold lace scarlet coat, used to amuse all the people with his antics. On one occasion, Charlie took me on his shoulders and leaped a bar more than 5 feet high in length. He was so generously treated because of his feat that he became gloriously drunk an hour afterward, and I had to lead him home just at sunset with a parade of folks following behind. King Charlie was probably the first parade grand marshal as he led us up to Pinkster Hill, throwing azaleas at the crowd. A local celebrity he was, to Dutch and African alike. Born in Angola of royal blood, purchased as an infant, and highly favored by a local respected businessman. King Charles was always ready for a good time and was also a famous jockey for Mr. Hare Dow's racehorses. One winter night, several Native Americans and their entourages went to a reception and a dinner at Dow's estate in East Albany. It was evening, and after a typical Dutch supper where the guests grew a little merry, General Schuyler, yes, if you've seen Hamilton or know anything about history, that's Schuyler, offered to bet a large amount of money that the horse he rode to the dinner could beat Dow's famous racehorse called Sturgeon that had won many a purse. Well, a group of white men, Indians, and blacks began clearing a racetrack in the dark on the ice at the frozen river. King Charlie rode Sturgeon. We don't care who rode Schuyler's horse, no one knows, because we know that when those horses took off, there was no question. King Charles on Sturgeon won handily. So all hail King Charlie, King of the Blacks, Albany's Pinkster King. Of course, the Dutch loved Pinkster too. Hard partiers, those Dutch. No water for their cups. The rule was you couldn't leave the party until dawn, until after every single drop of spirits was drunk. For a full week, the Dutch, they drank and made merry. Where were the Africans all this time? The Dutch didn't worry. The Dutch, as slave owners, were relatively humane, so to speak. But when the British took control, well, they didn't like seeing the Africans so free. The African population swelled and the colonies prospered. The British got rid of the possibility of freedom for Africans proper, with a series of laws to keep Africans in their place, dehumanizing and disgraceful because of the false notion of race. But for over 100 years, Pinkster was the jam. From the upper Hudson Valley down here to New Amsterdam, even parts of Maryland and Virginia were in on the fun. But in 1740, South Carolina banned the drum. And growing personal food, and learning to read and gathering in groups, a sure sign of things to come. In 1803, Albany lawmakers finally said, no way, Pinkster Festival, dead. Too many Africans in one place, too much freedom. The dancing, the drums, we smell rebellion. Has a slave revolt ever happened up north? Not that we know of, but that fear took root. It continues to blow up. Pinkster didn't die. It just went underground and into the blood memories of American African descendants. That legacy comes back around. A foundation for a first-in-the-nation event, personal and community affirmation. In 2011, New York State officially repealed the ban, and so today starts the reclamation. Yambala, oh yeah, oh, 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 oh yeah, oh yeah, Yambala, oh yeah, oh, 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 oh yeah, oh Ashe. So, we just want to thank you again. Here we are. I just want to tell you a little bit about the last dance that we did. One of the exciting things about Pinkster is that in the North we have very few sites of Africanist retention, and Pinkster was one of those places because of the political climate. It allowed freed and enslaved and colored folk to work and live and associate together at some point, which was very unusual. As we know, starting in 1740, unfortunately, laws were made to specifically oppress and keep people behind. But in the Sea Islands, as we know, some of those retentions happened, the Georgia Sea Islands, the Gullah Geechee people, as well as we know that in New Orleans, it was legal for Africans to dance and sing together on Sundays only. But because of the forcible removing of not just cultural traits, but human traits, again, you can't grow your own food? What? I mean, imagine the fear. I digress. What I'm trying to say is that what we just presented is a version of the quadrille. You might know the quadrille in many different forms. It started as creolization of the minuet, which is a French court dance. We know that the Dutch were extremely prosperous as a country, and so most prosperous countries, especially those with royalty, borrowed French dancing masters, and so we know that the French spread, particularly their core traditions, throughout the rest of Europe. So we can imagine that the Dutch royalty and the Dutch nobility would have known these dances, and that the Africans who often played for them and called the steps for these dances. Hence we get, what? Square dancing, right? We know that that happened as well. So what we did is we just presented a combination of what we imagined some of those steps would look like based on some of the Caribbean-based quadrilles as well as the French and New Orleans-based quadrilles. And I just would like to thank you again, and of course, introduce our performers to you, because they are amazing. I'm gonna start up here to my left. This is the inimitable Newman T. Baker on the washboard. We had to have an authentic-based instrument. You know, they played bones, spoons, cowbells, anything that was found, right, became percussion, including the body and the feet, which you saw earlier, right? We have Brother Owusu on the djembe. The djembe probably was not played at this time, but we do know that they played large bass kettle drums, which were basically skins that were strung over large kettles that they beat on, and so the beats tended to be very, as you heard, bass heavy, so right, with little fill-in like we have now with the djembe, et cetera, et cetera. And then our fantastic dancers, Trishina Connor. Trishina actually also is a full-time dance teacher in Brooklyn for public schools. So we still have those happening, and they're still very, very necessary. I made the choice to send my son to a school that has a full-time dance teacher that they refuse to cut. That was a choice. And it's public, so it can be done. And then Brian Davis. Brian Davis is also known as Mr. Taptastic. He also has a fantastic company in his own right, and Brian often serves as my assistant. And then I also want to introduce my son, y'all saw him. That's Sebastian Thelonious Morgan. And then I'd also like to introduce another member of the Okra Dance Company who serves as an overall eye and godfather, and that's Dexter Jones. Dexter Jones is famous in his own right. toured many times with Riverdance, Black and Blue, so many things. It's fantastic talent. I'm working with Camille A. Brown right now. He's one of her scholars in residence. So blah, 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 if you know that kind of dance. And I'm Shereen Dixon, and I am so grateful to be here and to bring all of these fabulous collaborators to you. Thank you, Meredith.
I'm right here. Over here.
Thank you, Melissa. And Stephanie left. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. We'll take a couple of questions, unless you guys got some place to be. And if not, then we'll just say thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.